Hello, baseball fans, and welcome back to another video. So, as the deadline gets closer and closer, Brandon and I have been talking a lot about who's going possibly where. And two teams we really want to focus on is the Cubs and the Red Sox. They could be doing a lot of business right now, but it's all dependent. There's a million things it could be dependent on. It's dependent on contract, dependent on money and what people want to spend. And I think there are a few positions that could be really shifted between each team. So, Brandon, I'm going to shoot it over to you. Who do you think should go where for each team?
Yeah, it's the Cubs and the Red Sox are really interesting trade fits right now because the Cubs are very clearly all in for 2025. Kyle Tucker's about to be a free agent. There's no guarantee they re-sign him. There's a lot of questions about their top prospects and how much value they'll have going forward. They're all in for 2025. They're going to buy good players. The Red Sox, on the other hand, are like walking a tightrope. They have they're on like a 5 or 6 game winning streak at the time of this recording. They're back above 500, and it looks like they might be buyers. But like a week or two ago, they were down in the dumps. They traded Rafael Devers. They looked like they were abandoning ship, and they looked like they were going to be huge sellers. So they might do a little bit of both, which is why I think that these two teams might match up really, really well on a trade. And that trade obviously would look something like Alex Bregman, the third baseman, assuming he's healthy by the trade deadline, going to the Cubs, who pursued him very heavily in free agency, as we talked about in a lot of our videos. And then in exchange, the Cubs would send out some salary to offset Alex Bregman's huge $40 million salary, as well as some prospects, mostly pitchers that are close to the major leagues, since obviously that's what the Red Sox really, really need at this moment. So one iteration of this trade that could work. I'm not saying this would be the finalized deal, but it would be Alex Bregman heading over to the Cubs. And then in exchange, the Cubs would send out someone like Jamison Tyone just for salary purposes. He's currently hurt right now, but he's obviously a quality starter when he's healthy, but that's to offset some salary. And then as well as at least one top pitching prospect, someone like Jackson Wiggins or Ryan Gallagher, both of whom are slowly climbing the minor league ladder, but are getting closer to the majors and probably will make their debut at some point next year. And then as well as maybe another prospect like James Triantos, who's a guy who can play the infield and outfield. Maybe Ben Brown, if the Cubs don't think they can fix him in the minor leagues, who's a really electric arm who could be a great reliever if he doesn't work out as a starter. There's a lot of moving parts is the point of this trade. But I think that, and obviously, Ethan, I know you have a ton of thoughts on this. I think this is something that could work for both teams, both for the immediate future and going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that your idea of look, we need a third baseman when it comes to the Cubs, right? It's kind of the one place we're really lacking right now. However, again, going to the Red Sox, Garrett Crochet can only carry this team so far, and he's doing even though we're in fourth place, he is doing a tremendous job being a starting pitcher. I completely agree with you. I think that we've seen so often with the Cubs how well they train and work their minor leaguers and they end up becoming, all-stars. If you look, I don't want to say all-stars because, that's a trademark word, if you will. But, if you look at people like Javier Assad, I know Ben Brown's, like you said, is having a tough, season right now. But last season when he stepped up when all of the Cubs starting pitchers went out, he had, a pretty electric start to his career. I think the Cubs are very well known for turning minor leaguers into great players. And so, yeah, I think it would be great to have a bunch of minor leaguers and maybe somebody like Jamison Tyone, who's, he has a little bit more experience as bargaining chips. Again, the other thing is that with Bregman, he has this 3-year contract. He can opt out at any time. So, yeah, I feel like the ball is a little bit more in Boston's court, if you will. However, I think also it's the worry of Boston might say, look, we want to keep Bregman because, he's injured right now and he's going to, in theory, he's on the reserves for the All-Star game. But if they keep him, do you have any other ideas of who they might be willing to trade to the Cubs or vice versa?
Yeah, there's a lot. Again, what's really interesting is both teams really need starting pitching, but in different ways. The Red Sox at this point need depth in their rotation. They got Garrett Crochet. He is the ace. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's better than anyone the Cubs have, including our boy Shodi Imanaga. Um, and they have Brian Bayo behind him. Besides that, it's like really just like, it's open hunting season. Who know, Lucas Giolito's been okay recently. Richard Fitz has been a bit of a mess. Walker Bueller's been a disaster. They just need answers. They need quality arms in the rotation, which is where someone like Jamison Tyone, Javier Assad, if those guys are healthy, maybe Ben Brown, maybe Jordan Wicks, The Cubs have Colin Ray. The Cubs have a lot of those kinds of guys on the roster. That's not in question. What the Cubs need is a really high-end starting pitcher. Obviously, the Red Sox are not trading Garrett Crochet under any circumstances. That's not what I'm suggesting. And they're not trading Brian Bayo either. But it's one of those things where the Cubs can afford to deal one of these depth arms, whoever it is, to the Red Sox in exchange for maybe the Red Sox have had a really good bullpen. The Cubs look like they might need another setup man. Maybe that a decade ago they traded for Aroldis Chapman. They won the World Series with him. Maybe that could be lined up here. Um, the Cubs could do that and trade a depth starter if they have another deal lined up elsewhere to bring in a really high end starter and sort of move pieces around like that. So I just think that the rosters fit really neatly for a trade. Obviously, Craig Breslow, who runs the Red Sox, is a Cubs protege. He came over from the Cubs a couple of years ago. He now, runs the operation in Boston. So there's rapport there. There's, fit there. I think that it would be not shocking to not see the two teams match up for a deal because anything can happen, obviously, at the trade deadline. But this makes a lot of sense to me on paper.
Yeah, I think the one thing that maybe especially Boston will look out for is mistakes being made, within a trade happening. And maybe, the upper management of the Red Sox don't see it as this, but let's take Rafi Devers, for example. They traded off Rafi Devers to the Giants. The team had already been kind of falling apart, but Rafi Devers was a huge pillar, like kind of holding them together. So the hope is, and hope that when they trade somebody away and they get somebody in return or multiple people in return, that the wheels don't fall off again like they did with Rafi Devers. And maybe that's a hot take on mine and many other baseball fans, thoughts. But at the same time, I think they've already kind of made a mistake mid-season, and now they kind of have to pivot.
Yeah, no, it's that Devers trade really does change things because if the Red Sox had Devers right now and they were on this like winning streak that they're on, I think it'd be pretty easy to say like yeah, like they have a they might not go all in like the Cubs are gonna do, but they have a reason to not sell anyone and to try to make some good buying decisions at the deadline. Without Devers, and again, what's really important about the Red Sox this year is the Red Sox key components of the roster are all rookies right now. And Garrett Crochet is like 25 or 26. He's really young too. It's Roman Anthony, Marcello Mayer, Narvaez, Carlos Narvaez, the catcher. Eventually, Christian Campbell will come back up to the majors. Like that's the core of the roster. Like that's who they need to be focused on developing right now, and more so than making a run at a wild card spot. Their priority, I think, has to be on developing those guys and getting them ready for 2026 and beyond. So again, it just creates a thing where they're winning too much to just sell off every piece. They can't just trade away everyone and say, better luck next year. They're too good right now. But at the same time, they can't afford to, trade away or trade or bring in guys that are going to cost them future talent. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Again, the Cubs are more certain. They're going to bring in a starting pitcher of some sort, probably a high end one. They're going to bring in a bullpen arm of some sort, probably a high end one. They'll probably bring in a third baseman, probably a high end one. They're going to trade a lot of prospects. So we'll see what happens between these two teams. As always, we'd love to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments on this. Obviously, we'll be posting this on both Talk Sox and Northside Baseball, both sister sites. Feel free to jump over to one and the other, see what the other community is saying. And as always, we'll respond to every comment that we see.